Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is 6 o'clock. Excuse me. It is 6 o'clock. Nicole. If everyone that is here, if you could please kindly find a place to sit. There can be no standing from members of the audience. So please find a place to sit. It is 6 o'clock. We are going to be starting momentarily once everyone is seated. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for the school system budget hearing. At this time, clerk, if you could, please take a roll of the committee members.
Councilman Ferry,
Present.
Councilwoman Jermaine,
Present.
Councilman Campiano,
Present.
Council Paplaskas, Council Vice President Vargas, Councilman Donegan,
Present.
Council President Marino.
Present.
I apologize, everyone. We're waiting for our finance director and a solicitor, as well as someone from the administration. The way we'll proceed this evening is typically public hearing is done when the department is concluded, but given the amount of people here this evening and the interest, if it's, we'll take a motion out of order, and if that motion to take the docket out of order passes, we'll allow public comment first. That way, folks that are here to speak can have the opportunity to speak. We'll hear from the school administration. Will come forward. The committee will have a discussion, and we'll move forward. The next meeting of this committee is on Thursday evening, same place for amendments, and then next week the council will take final action on the budget. We're going to take for right now, a 5-minute break until 6:10. We are in recess. For any members of the public who wish to speak this evening during the public comment portion, there is a sign-up sheet that is presented in the front. For any members of the public who wish to speak during public comment this evening, there is a sign-up sheet here at the podium at the front. I kindly ask that you sign up and limit your comments to 4 minutes. So good evening. We are waiting for a solicitor to arrive. Just as a reminder, there can be no one standing. So please, there's plenty of space up here in the front. Please find a place to sit. And we will begin as soon as possible. We're waiting for the administration to have a solicitor here. So as a precaution, we are waiting to have legal present here this evening. Estimated time to begin tonight, and I apologize, and I can understand any frustration, is about 10 minutes. We're hoping to start in about 10 minutes. We are waiting for legal representation. We're waiting for the solicitor to arrive. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience. There is a sheet for any members of the public that want to sign up for public comment. Good evening, everyone. At this time, we are going to come out of recess. We have already taken a roll. Clerk, if you could, please, Council Vice President Vargas is present, as well as Councilwoman Renzulli, not a member of the committee, but a member of the council. Thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to begin with public comment. As I said, typically in the finance budget hearings, we do department, then council discussion and committee discussion, and then public comment. Tonight, given the public interest this evening, we'll do public comment first, followed by committee deliberation. At this time, I would like to welcome to the floor Superintendent Janine Nadamasi.
Good evening. Thank you. I come to you this evening not only as the superintendent of Cranston Public Schools, but also a taxpayer and a parent and a lifelong educator. So good evening, Council President and members of the City Council. I would like to begin by thanking you and the members of this body for the opportunity to come before you this evening. Over the last few months, my team and I have diligently worked to deliver a budget for the upcoming fiscal year that best serves the educational needs of the students and staff in Cranston. I acknowledge we have a considerable budget, much of which is manifested by many federal and state mandates, regulations, guidelines, and rules. It is intricate and can be confusing, which may lead some to misunderstand or misrepresent it. However, I challenge you to look at our 11,000 plus line items and dare say it lacks transparency. As you know, the budget process is extremely time and labor intensive. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my administrative team for all of their hard work, as well as the school committee who vetted this budget over the course of hours-long meetings in February. Additionally, I would like to take a moment to individually recognize the efforts of our highly respected Chief Financial Officer, sitting here in front of me, Mr. Joe Balducci, who has tirelessly worked to ensure that our budget not only serves the needs of our students and staff, but is also fair and equitable to the taxpayers of the city of Cranston. Notably, he is one as well. So being that the school department comprises the largest portion of the city's budget, I expect to be asked some very pointed and probing questions here this evening. And I can assure you that we intend to clearly answer them. But first, I want to illustrate that the size of the school department's budget is proportional to the sheer impact it has on our collective social and economic lives. The functions of our public schools are not only relegated to teaching and learning, which are the heart and soul of our institution. Our schools also serve as centers for the community in the arts and athletics. They are safe places for children who may be neglected, abused, or hungry. They provide critical public health services in the way of screenings, inoculations, and preventative care. During the pandemic, we worked seamlessly with the Cranston Fire Department to provide vaccines to the entire community. And our schools serve to address and hopefully mitigate the mounting mental health needs of our students and their families on a daily basis. It would take a pandemic to truly realize how vitally important our schools are to our children and our society at large. When we were forced to close and stopped providing in-person service, we all realized how critical our impact is on the everyday lives of our citizens. When children are not in school for long periods of time, it impacts parents and families who cannot get to work. I am proud to say here this evening that the Cranston Public Schools serves as an example to the rest of the districts in this state. When you look around at other districts, not only of similar size, but of demographic and socioeconomic composition, you cannot help but recognize that our district has a well-earned reputation of being solid as a rock. This is so for many reasons, but especially due to the support of our students and their families, our excellent teachers, our community partnerships, and our hardworking school and district leaders. Inasmuch as the unwavering support of this community has propelled and sustained us through what could be described as the greatest crisis in American education in almost a century, we continue to struggle and cope with the damaging effects of the pandemic, which include tremendous learning loss as well as grave social and emotional needs. Despite these challenges, my administration has sought to put effective measures in place using federal resources at our disposal to address the needs of our students in the areas of social and emotional support, attendance teams, accelerated learning, and various curricular upgrades. At the same time, as we grapple with the lingering effects of COVID, we have not lost sight of our long-term vision of upgrading our school facilities for the 21st century. As you know, on November 3rd, 2020, the voters of our city approved a $147 million bond proposal for school facility upgrades. Of the 38,759 votes cast, the bond passed with an overwhelming majority of 30,814 votes, or 79.5%. An impressive mandate, to say the least. New 21st century places of learning are economic drivers for this city. I'm going to repeat that. New 21st century places of learning are economic drivers for this city. Property values increase, as does the desire to attend the new schools in these neighborhoods. These crucial funds have been thoroughly leveraged, along with substantial once-in-a-lifetime reimbursements from the Rhode Island School Building Authority to fund project upgrades, such as a multi-phase renovation of Eden Park Elementary School, the demolition and complete reconstruction of a new Garden City Elementary School, which is nearing completion and scheduled to open in the fall, and the proposed demolition and complete reconstruction of Gladstone Street Elementary School. Additionally, we have various other smaller scale projects nearing completion around the district, which include security upgrades at Cranston High School West, much needed HVAC upgrades at Western Hills Middle School, and new roofs, boilers, and other behind the scenes improvements. As we chart the path forward, these projects are on the waypoints of our journey toward a brighter future. They are essential, not only to the current needs of our students, but to the long-term cultural, social, and economic health of our city. But most importantly, they are a moral imperative. Therefore, I ask you to listen to the speakers this evening and consider increasing funding to our schools so we may continue to provide a laudable education to all of our students, who at the end of their careers with us have many options for their lives when they leave our charge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Superintendent. At this time, I'm going to go straight down the order of the names on the list, and then if there are other members of the public that wish to speak after that, certainly we'll have the opportunity to do so. At this time, I'd like to recognize former mayor and current school committee member, Michael Trafficante.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read a statement into the record and follow that by discussing a document with you that Rosalba will be passing out, identifying the reasons why we are requesting an additional $2.4 million for the school budget. Madam President, Chairman Donegan, members of the Cranston City Council. The evening Mayor Hopkins presented his FY24 municipal budget, I was out of town. However, a colleague of mine on the school committee contacted me shortly thereafter by phone and basically informed me that the proposed municipal budget did not include any additional dollars for the Cranston School Department's operating budget. In essence, the school department's operating budget was level funded for fiscal year 24. To be totally honest with each of you, That announcement did not come as a surprise because the mayor's administration informed me several months earlier that the school budget and the school department's operational budget would not experience any additional dollars. Nevertheless, as an advocate for education over the past 39 years as a Cranston elected official, I was truly disappointed. The city council and Mayor Hopkins have been very supportive of education during FY 22 with a $1.5 million appropriation and FY 23 with a $1 million appropriation. I was truly hoping that in spite of my prior knowledge, that the city's financial support would emulate the past two budget increases. I was also hoping that the 11,000 constituents, our students and their parents, would not be disappointed as well with the mayor's proposed budget. Members of the city council, the municipal budget is now your property. You have the authority by charter to amend it. Those of us on the Cranston School Committee are strongly requesting that you will mirror your previous support for the Cranston's quality education system by amending this budget and appropriate additional dollars for our schools. I received a copy recently of the mayor's budget message, and he states on page 2 and page 3, and I quote, "The most important job we have as local government is to operate city departments efficiently and offer the basic services to people, our people, from police and fire protection, trash collection, snow removal, clean parks and playgrounds." I was very disappointed to read in that particular paragraph that education is not even mentioned as one of the basic responsibilities and services of local government. Members of the city council, as you are well aware, there are only two major financial buckets for educational support. One is state aid to education, and the second is local government appropriation. The mayor further states on page 2, and I quote, "The budget being unveiled tonight will continue to meet the fiscal needs of our city and effectively meet the needs of our constituents. It is clear that the 11,000 student constituents' fiscal needs were not considered essential in the proposed budget. Members of the council, may I remind you and the administration that the quality of life we have come to enjoy and appreciate in our great city is not only directly related to an effective and efficient police department and fire department, a public works department or recreation department, or a senior services department. That quality of life I speak of is also strongly related and directly related to the quality of the child that we graduate from our 4 high schools in the city of Cranston. Council members, I know you are well aware that level funding a school budget directly impacts that quality. And it's that quality that is not healthy, not sustainable, nor is it educationally sound. So members of the council, it's obvious tonight that I did not come before you to praise Caesar. But I'm also here not to bury Caesar as well. No one knows better than I, who produced 14 municipal budgets as mayor to include several tax increases, the difficulty of formulating a municipal financial package that maintains effective city departments while simultaneously keeping the taxpayers satisfied and happy. It is, I assure you, a very difficult equation to balance. However, on page 12 of his budget message, the mayor hangs his hat on the $2.5 million proposed and the council supported back in FY 22 and FY 23. I said it back then, and I'll repeat it again tonight. We, as a school committee and as a school department, are extremely grateful for the FY 22 and FY 23 contributions to education. However, we are here tonight to address the future, FY 24. On pages 8 and 9 of his budget message, he cites a number of unanticipated and mandated expenses and significant revenue loss, such as pension increases, utility increases, healthcare increases, to name a few. May I, once that document is passed out to you, clearly and precisely demonstrate in black and white why we as a school department and the school committee are facing similar situations, and we are requesting an additional $2.4 million. And I assure you, it has no bearing whatsoever on contractual obligations. A few months back, we gave you our assurances that contracts were affordable, and I stand by that statement today as well. The document that's going to be distributed to you will identify our revenue loss as well as our unanticipated expenses. Madam President, Mr. Chairman, and members of the City Council, for the last 4 years, this council has clearly demonstrated your financial support for education. The 11,000 Cranston school children and their parents are once again relying on that same support. I too, as chairman and members and my colleagues on the Cranston School Committee are also depending on the continued support. Thank you. Whoop. The document that is before you, if you look at the top half of that document, it states in FY '23, the city appropriated the adopted budget of roughly 98.5 million. The school committee has recommended to you a proposed budget of 100.9 million, which is a difference of approximately 2.4 million. And that's our request coming before you this evening. By contributing factors, let's look at our revenue situation. In FY '23, state government appropriated $2,387,054. In FY '24, the state has appropriated $1.5 million, a difference of $852,127. That is the loss of revenue. Under expenditures, let's talk about pensions. You experienced a similar situation on your half of the budget. The pensions rose by 0.6% for an additional expenditure of $502,914. In terms of external charter school tuitions and state schools, an additional $330,398. And the state ride basically designates $8,490 per student in that category for a total expenditure of $3,956,340. In terms of pathway programs, CTE tuition rates is set at 14 to 16,000, depending on whether they're, what's the term, Joe? Free or reduced lunch, correct. For an additional $50,569,069 for a total expenditure of $856,268. In terms of special education outside tuitions for medical and behavioral situations, identified by IEP teams, we have 114 students for a total expenditure of $7,643,956. Statewide transportation, which is dictated by the state of Rhode Island, an outside agency for a student. We have additional expenditure of $69,522 for a total expenditure of $2,386,922. In terms of our utilities, experienced on both sides of the budget, our gas heat went down by $84,000, electricity went up by $402,000. Oil heat went down by $30,000. That total, if you include the revenue loss plus our expenditures, it comes to approximately $2.9 million. We have revenue in terms of Medicaid reimbursement of $250,000, approximately $50,000 for our CTE programs. And also we had some savings, of course, with gas and heat. So our total expenditure before this council that we're asking for is approximately $2.4 million. Thank you.
At this time, entertain a motion to accept this into the record.
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please take a roll.
Councilman Ferry,
Yes.
Councilwoman Jermaine,
Yes.
Councilman Campiano,
Yes.
Council Vice President Vargas,
Yes.
Councilman Donegan,
Yes.
Council President Marino.
At this time, I'd like to invite to this podium my school committee representative, Dominic Fusco.
Fix this. Thank you, Chairman Donegan, Madam President, members of the City Council. We come before you again tonight asking for funding. This is something we don't necessarily enjoy, but it is a necessity. As Chairman Trafficante mentioned, the school district has only two avenues of funding: city appropriations and state appropriations. In the past few years, the state has declared that Cranston is more fiscally sound, as you have noticed with the discontinuation of the distressed funding to the city. Well, that now also translate into the state stating that the city should pick up more of the funding of schools. And as a result, as the Chairman Trafficante mentioned, a decrease in state funding. I'll get into that a little bit more in a second. First, I'd like to point out a few things that you may or may not be aware of. Everyone likes to compare us to Warwick. Warwick is the third largest school district in the state, as we are the second. Cranston has about 11,000 students, and Warwick roughly 9,000. Cranston's fiscal 23 budget, in again rough terms, was 173 million. Warwick was 179 million. Cranston's fiscal 24 proposed budget is 180 million. Warwick's proposed budget for fiscal 24 is 186 million. State aid, as Chairman Trafficante mentioned, state aid to Cranston is proposed to receive roughly, I'm rounding up to 1.6 million over last year. Warwick, in the proposed state budget, is to receive $3.27 million increase. Just to set things straight a little, Warwick might still be considered lower fiscally than Cranston. So let's take this back for a minute. In the proposed budget at the State House right now, Barrington is scheduled to receive $2.1 million increase. Sorry, Barrington and Cranston are not fiscally the same. In this proposed budget, let's take a look at some things. For example, salaries. Teachers' salaries for the second largest district ranks 8th in the state of Rhode Island. High school principals, where we have the two largest high schools in the state, are roughly 11% lower than the average high school principal in the state. In fact, many high school principals in the state are paid more than our central administration staff, administrators. Middle school and elementary school principals, they're not even coming close to the top 5 in terms of salaries in the state of Rhode Island. Our proposed budget, we must pay out almost $4 million to charter schools for our students who attend them. And what really bothers me at the state budget, Achievement First Charter School is proposed to receive a $10 million increase. Let that sink in for a second. They are getting money from the cities and towns that send students there, plus an additional $10 million in Governor McKee's budget. How are districts supposed to compete with that? There's also a few things that I've heard in this past few years that I want to kind of just reiterate and clear up a little bit too. It's been mentioned several times that the city appropriates money to the schools without any say. Well, that is what my colleagues and I have been elected to manage. I am quite proud of the probing questions our freshman class brought to the table this year during our budget hearings. For folks who went through this process for the first time, and trust me, I remember when I went through the first time, it was very difficult. The questions were very good. They were, the budget, our budget is not easy to understand. And the diligence they brought forth and the questions they asked to learn and understand how our budget works was commendable. So please, rest assured, the school budget is in very capable hands. Next, we've heard that the city has no formal role in the construction process. This is also not true. Every plan that the school department creates must be approved by the city planning board, the city zoning board. All plans for schools must be approved by the school's building committee, which contains members of the school committee, city council, and city officials from different departments. All buildings, once they're built, must be approved by the fire department and city inspectors. Every penny that's spent by the school department on a building has to be approved by the city purchasing board. Finally, past couple of years, I've heard that school bond debt services are as high. Well, yes, they might be. But as I mentioned in the past to this council, that'll soon be reimbursed. For example, Gladstone School, which is scheduled to be completed roughly a couple of months. The cost of that building is $48 million. The cost to the city, Garden City, what did I say? Oh, shoot, sorry. Yeah, I apologize. Anyway, all right, so rewind. Garden City, which is scheduled to be completed strong, is at a cost of $48 million. The cost of the city, once the state reimburses, will be $15 million. Gladstone, the budgeted cost is $83 million. And yes, we have factored in inflation and made necessary adjustments. The cost of the city will be $22 million. Eden Park, once completed, the total cost for the 3 phases will be $37 million, with a cost of the city of $12 million. The city has already received an advance of $17 million on these projects through PAYGO. Unfortunately, the receipt of these funds we have been informed, but because of the receipt of these funds, we've been informed the city is not planning to release the full $147 million in bonds, that these projects were approved by 80% of the voters in 2020. As a result, the finishing of Eden Park is now on hold. So please, don't hold this debt against the schools. The schools will soon have 2 brand new schools and 1 refurbished school that'll bring education for our students in the 21st century for a total cost of the city, $49 million. That is $169 million in new construction for $49 million, or 29.5% of the cost. I challenge any other industry to find a deal like that. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate all the past support, and I look forward to working closely with you again in the future. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call School Committee Member Keith Catone.
A little taller than my colleague. Thank you, Chairman Donegan. Good evening, Madam President, council members, colleagues, friends, community members, Zoomers. For those of you who don't know, my name is Keith Catone. I serve as the Ward 1 representative on the Cranston School Committee. I'm one of those freshman class that my colleague Dominic Fusco just named. I'm a redshirt freshman. I was appointed 6 months early. So I'd like to open first just by affirming that during our budget review process as a school committee, I am very confident that my colleagues on the committee looked at every corner of this budget, asked thoughtful and difficult questions of our school administration, and determined that this budget represents what it costs to provide the standard of high quality education that Cranston students, families, and residents expect and deserve from our public school system. Our mayor stated in his budget address that the city budget would support, quote, blue ribbon schools, end quote, throughout the city of Cranston. If this is to be true, this is no time to shortchange the school operating budget, or as Mr. Fusco just pointed out, school construction projects. And let's make no mistake, simple and legally required level of maintenance funding is by any honest measure a shortchanging of our schools. I want to emphasize that the budget we have submitted to the city is what it costs if we are to meet a blue ribbon standard, $180.5 million, not 178.1, which is what we would be left with should the mayor's proposed budget be approved as is. I'm responsible for developing and reviewing budgets at my job for many different projects, none quite as large as the Cranston Public Schools. But when working with funders, contractors, and partners, the first thing I want to know about the expense of a project is the true cost of high quality work and a high quality product. I do not want to know what things cost when we cut corners or shortchange, or look to create savings in ways that would be a detriment to what we are trying to accomplish. In this case, if we want to support our schools to a blue ribbon standard, then we must meet the needs demonstrated by our proposed budget. I would like to highlight at least just 3 parts for now of the school budget to emphasize our need and discuss why we cannot afford what has been proposed by the mayor. First, as we all know, and as it already has been stated and you have documentation of, we're facing increased costs of utilities and other areas due to the economy and overall inflation. Everybody in this room is facing those increased costs at home and in the city. That's just that. So next year alone, as you can see with what Mr. Trafficante gave to you, it's projected that our electrical expenses will increase by over $400,000. That's just one example of an area out of our control that simply costs more in order to provide the education our students and families deserve. And in this particular case, to literally just keep the lights on. Second is that to balance the proposed budget, and this is really important, I think, to understand what we've done. To balance the proposed budget, our proposed budget, in addition to the increased contribution we'd like to see from the city, our administration and our committee has approved a proposed dipping into our school fund balance reserve. That's our cash reserve, a rainy day fund, for lack of a better term, by nearly $3 million. That's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination and puts us in some ways in a vulnerable spot in the future. But it is what is necessary to do what it takes to provide the education our students and families deserve. Finally, as has already been pointed out, you might notice that our budget must accommodate for nearly $4 million out of district to cover charter school tuitions, half of which approximately go to Achievement First. Everyone on the school committee knows this is an issue about which I care deeply. We must signal to families that we are committed to investing in our schools to help them choose the Cranston Public School System. We simply cannot afford more families to opt into charter schools. Instead, we need to bring families and students back to the Cranston Public Schools, which one requires understanding why there are over 400 students' families choosing to send them to charters. It also requires us to send the right signals to our community. Shortchanging the school budget is not that signal. It's not that signal. We need to send the opposite one, that we care deeply for our schools and we will invest in them accordingly. Lastly, as you know, I speak to you tonight as a Ward 1 representative on the school committee. I'm also a public school parent of an elementary school, 5th grader, so soon to be middle schooler, and a professional with nearly 25 years working in and around public school systems across the country. Among my circle of friends, I'm often the one people call when they have questions about what they should do about their child's education when they are making decisions about where to send their children to school. In fact, this weekend, I was at a conference, education research conference. I had another friend from graduate school text me saying they're looking to move to Rhode Island. Where should they move to? They're concerned about the schools. What's my impression of the Cranston Public Schools? I said to him, one of the things that I'm impressed by the Cranston Public Schools, not only our programs, what we can offer to students, the services, the dedicated educators, all the things that we all know about, it's also a sense of stability and confidence and faith in our schools. So one thing that's one thing I'm confident in saying about the Cranston Public Schools, that we have a sense of stability and confidence. That's what I've told friends when they ask what our experience has been like at our elementary school. In this day and age in public schools, that stability is not to be taken for granted. Throughout the state and across the country, we have tons of examples of other districts with more volatile situations and unpredictable circumstances. In order to maintain that sense of stability, confidence, and faith in our schools for our community, we must fund them fully. The mayor's proposed budget opens up the floodgates to a very slippery slope that would threaten the stability, consistency, and quality of education that our hardworking administration, teachers, and staff can provide in our city. I'm hopeful that the council will take into strong consideration what myself and my colleagues are sharing tonight and have shared with you in detail in our proposed budget to increase the city's contribution to our schools by the $2.4 million requested so that we can establish the necessary education that our communities expect and deserve. Thanks.
At this time, call to the podium, school committee member Anthony Melillo.
A little shorter than him. Good evening. My name is Anthony Melillo. I'm Ward 6 School Committee member. I'd like to first start off with some quotes from some campaign material that I read. You might recognize some of these because they're from all of your campaign material. I'm not going to call anybody out by name, but number one is, I firmly believe in the importance of public education and support for our teachers. That was one council person. Another council person said, investing in quality education for all students is my number one goal. Number three, I am humbled to receive the endorsements. I am grateful to the Cranston Teachers Alliance, the Cranston Firefighters, the Women's Caucus, and plan to work hard for all of them to make sure they receive all they need to run properly. Number four, I want to strengthen our schools into more enriching and safer places of learning. Number five, together we have accomplished so much. We have updated playgrounds, worked towards building new parks, and make sure we have great public safety and public schools. Number six, my parents moved to Cranston to provide their children with a great education. I am running to make sure my children get the same education as I did. I will support the Cranston Public Schools and make sure my children have the same opportunity as I did. That is directly from campaign material from each and, well, most of you. I didn't get every single person here, but most of you I did. I'm here to speak on the importance of a fully funded school system and why it's crucial for several reasons. Number one, it provides adequate resources for quality education. A well-funded school system will provide the necessary resources such as books, technology, supplies, and facilities that teachers need to effectively educate their students. When schools lack funding, it could result in overcrowded classrooms, outdated material, and inadequate facilities, all of which will negatively impact the quality of education. Number two, a fully funded school system is crucial. It ensures quality and equal opportunity. A fully funded school system will help reduce the achievement gap between low-income and high-income students by providing all students with equal access to high-quality education. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds often have fewer resources available to them outside of school. So it is essential that schools have the funding to provide these students with the support and resources they need to succeed. Number three, a fully funded school system attracts and retains talented teachers. Adequate funding will also help schools attract and retain talented teachers. When schools lack funding, they often have to cut back on teacher salaries and benefits, which can make it difficult to attract and retain quality educators. By adequately funding schools, we will ensure that teachers are compensated fairly and that they have the resources they need to do their jobs effectively. Four, it prepares students for success. Finally, a fully funded school will help prepare students for success in college and their careers. When schools have the resources they need, they can provide students with a well-rounded education that includes not only academic subjects, but also extracurricular activities such as sports, music, and drama. These activities will help students develop important life skills such as teamwork, leadership, and communication, which are essential for success in any field. Overall, a fully funded school system is essential for ensuring that all Cranston students have access to high-quality education regardless of their background or circumstances. It can help reduce the achievement gap, attract and retain talented teachers, and prepare students for success in colleges and their careers. Our job as elected officials is to create a society that when people that come before others plant trees, the shade of which they will never enjoy. Thank you and good luck.
At this time, I'd like to call to the podium Liz Larkin.
Good evening. I would like to thank the council for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. As you know, I am president of the Cranston Teachers Alliance, and I take that very seriously. I represent near 1,240 employees of the 1,500 employees of the Cranston School Department. And I'm really hoping that we can count on you to provide us with more funding, so we do not have to have our school committee members go back to the drawing board and make serious cuts to our program and services, because we really want to completely and wholly do our jobs. As you know, that I have an opinion on supporting Cranston Public Schools because I advocate for them every day and many times in front of you and the school committee and at many meetings, as you all do as well. All of you have shown some kind of support for the Cranston Public Schools, and what's not to support? They are the jewel of our city. I am asking that all of you work very hard to allocate funds out of the mayor's city budget to support the superintendent's and the school committee's budget. It was carefully prepared and it was made to meet the needs of our district. Please continue to make our schools competitive and providing the future that the children of Cranston deserve. Thank you.
At this time, call to the podium April Giuliano.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the City Council. My name is Aprile Giuliano, and as an itinerant psychologist, I've had the pleasure of working in many schools within Cranston. I had planned to come up here and speak about that incredible experience. That was until the kindergartners at Oak Lawn Elementary were practicing for a presentation where each student got to say what they wanted to be when they grow up and why. I listened to many 6- and 7-year-olds wish to grow up to become teachers like Miss Tyler Notoriani or Mrs. Dana Hudak. They're phenomenal educators to help kids like them learn. As I'm smiling at the thought of these tiny humans possibly coming back to work in Cranston, there was a somber moment knowing that attending meetings like this would also be part of their job. We're asking the board to ease one of the many barriers that our teachers have to overcome. Please vote to maintain or increase the district's funding so that Cranston schools may operate to the capacity in which it will inspire their future educators to want to come back. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call to the podium School Committee Member Kristen Haroy.
I'm a little shorter than everyone else. Good evening, Madam President, Council President, and Council members. I'm Christy Horoyan, proud member of Cranston School Committee, Ward 2. I stand here before you tonight to ask for support of our Cranston School Department budget for the school year 23-24. I find it interesting that locally, statewide, nationally, there's been a call for help for our children in our schools. Between the pressures of social media, the struggles with families, the increased social emotional concerns, and the long-term effects on the isolation and fear after the global pandemic. In Cranston, we've been told in our schools that we should do more with less. I don't understand how there can be a lack of support for our schools. Our budget was carefully, thoughtfully, and transparently developed, addressing the needs of the Cranston Public Schools and the increased costs provided an excellent education. We need the support of your committee, or we will be forced to cut needed positions, programs, and services. Thank you very much.
At this time, I'd like to call to the podium former School Committee Chairperson Dan Wall.
Where do I want this? Good evening, Dan Wall, 27 Sagamore Road, former school committee member, chairman of the school committee, teacher, parent. I wasn't really sure what I might say tonight. I jotted a few things down so you can be happy. It's only on this small piece of paper. It's not going to take very long. I guarantee you it's going to be sincere. I can say it first. When I first heard Mayor Hopkins, when he was running, he used the statement, "I'm going to be the education mayor." And I knew he's a teacher, coach, a man who cared about education. Recently, when I read in the Herald, and I heard people tell me that he was urging the school committee and the school system to do more with less, although I admire the statement, it's a nice platitude, it doesn't sound realistic. As a person who's been through many budget deliberations, hearings, council, with the superintendent and her staff, I can tell you, the superintendent and the people who work with her prepare a fair budget for our kids, fair budget for our taxpayers. The school committee, as a member of the school committee, we deliberate, we go line by line over the budget. We try to make sure we're giving you, once again, a fair budget. And I know, even though I wasn't involved in past practice, this is a fair budget. Listen, my friends, I don't have to tell you, education is the key to the success of our students, the key to the success of our city. It is our future, the future we talk about when we say what we want to do as public servants. Now, I want to mirror what Mr. Trafficani said. Over the years, I've been very thankful of generosity. The mayor, previous mayor, members of the council, some of the people sitting in this very room. I'm very grateful. However, I don't think now is the time to put the brakes on and hold on our past laurels. I would disagree with what the mayor is saying. Now is not the time to do more with less. The whole country, as Mr. Royan is saying, is worried about what's happening with learning loss due to the COVID pandemic. We as a city need to be vigilant at this time. We need to double down. We need to be strong on our support for our schools. So, once again, and I've said this when I've been in this meeting before, once again, I'm just going to say to you, it's going to come down to the people in this room. All right? It's going to come down to the members of the council. Fund this budget. Your students, the people in your community count on it. Thank you for your time.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak that are here in person?
I too in short. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam President, members of the council. I went back and forth as to whether or not I was going to speak this evening.
Excuse me, could you please state your name and address for the record, please?
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm Tara Norberg, School Committee Member, Ward 5. That's okay. My colleagues asked me to speak as a mom. So that's what I'm going to do. Not only am I a voter, I am a very involved parent in Cranston Public Schools. My son attends West, and I had the privilege of becoming involved with Cranston Public Schools very early on, as he has autism, thus making him able to attend our wonderful early childhood center at the age of 3. My experience with Cranston Public Schools from 2011 until now has been above and beyond anything I could possibly imagine, especially when you have a child who you've been told probably won't succeed by doctors. Doctors looked at me and said, he's probably not going to be able to do much. Well, I'm here to tell you that Cranston Public Schools has made sure that he can do a whole lot. He is a many of you have had, I'm going to be mom here, the privilege of having my son in your halls. Some of you have had the privilege of standing on a track, actually a year ago today, and scream as he ran in his first track meet. Some of you have never met him, but you've met children like him who have also been told that they're probably not going to be able to do much, whether they have autism or not. There are children in our schools that are told they're not going to be able to do much, not just by doctors, but by parents, their own parents, their family members, because maybe those family members were told that they weren't going to be able to do much. And that's just how they feel about themselves, and that is a shame. And as my colleagues have said over and over again, and I'm sure you're all aware, we just came out of something that these children could never have imagined to live through. My daughter was in preschool when the pandemic began and missed out, sadly, on fundamental pieces of education. My son was a 6th grader at Western Hills and had blossomed and quickly regressed a bit, because you go from, having this life and this social emotional, resources to now it's me. And I've got to say, I may have a BA in special education and elementary education, but I am not a nice teacher. Okay. He was the first one to say, I'm going to put that mask on and go to school. So that should also be a testament. He did not like Mrs. Norberg. I was not his cup of tea. But that being said, we have to consider what the 3 years have done to us. We're adults. We're able to fake it till you make it. Some of these kids don't have the tools, the resources to be able to do that. And that's what our schools can do for them. Those 11,000, is that right, Joe? 11,000? Those 11,000 children are 11,000 future voters. Cranston is not my hometown. I grew up in Texas, just south of Houston. And being here, this is my home now. My husband's asked me numerous times if I want to go back. And I have to say, I am a very proud resident of Cranston. And we teach our kids that this is where you want to be. So think about that. 11,000 opportunities to sit in these chairs, to be Madam President, to be the superintendent, to be an admin, to be an educator in our buildings. to give back like so many of you have done. There's so many educators who came through Cranston schools and they stayed here. Could they go elsewhere and make more money? You bet, but they're not. I urge you to think as parents who also have children in our schools. Please, it's just necessary. And again, 11,000 line items. I was like, you got to be kidding me reading 11,000 line items, but we read them and we questioned them a lot. And I too am in this freshman class and I'm proud of us because this budget is good. It's right where it needs to be. And I'm going to leave with this. We could have asked for a lot more. We probably should have. Thank you for your time.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? Seeing none in person, are there any members of the public online that wish to speak?
I see no public comment.
Thank you. At this time, we are going to close public comment. At this time, I would like recognize Mr. Tony Moretti, Chief of Staff to the Mayor.
Good evening, council members and ladies and gentlemen present in virtual. Tonight, as the Finance Committee reviews the school department budget, the mayor's asked me to pass along a few introductory remarks and appreciate your time. As a former teacher and a school department administrator, the mayor continues to be a strong education advocate for our students and school programs. Anyone that knows Ken Hopkins knows that he appreciates the dedication our classroom teachers bring to our schools every day to provide a great learning environment and strive for measurable success for their pupils. Now, as mayor, he must balance his advocacy for education with his broad responsibilities as chief executive to provide a wide spectrum of city services from education to police and fire, to public works and all the basic elements of government. The mayor has to try to fund all these services at a price residents and businesses can afford. As has been reported, he submitted to the city council a $325 million budget that was actually a $5 million reduction from prior year. In part, he was able to do that from a series of deep cuts and cost-cutting measures that were very difficult, In part, he was able to do that from a series of deep city cost-cutting measures and very difficult workforce reductions that affected the lives of 24 city employees. Our challenging times mandated a smaller government through a plan of job eliminations, retirements, and voluntary resignations. In the mayor's first 2 years, he offered an additional $2.5 million to our schools beyond the basic maintenance of effort that would have been required for the school department. That was the largest 2-year additional appropriation in at least the past decade. Over the past year, the mayors had provided advance notice to our school leadership that in this proposed budget, he would not be able to duplicate those efforts. Yet Cranston taxpayers will pay $98.5 million towards an overall school budget of approximately $178 million. There are some here this evening to say more is still needed. While the mayor sincerely respects those who would champion for more local dollars, this is a year when he directed departments that he controls on the city side to operate more financially efficient. Furthermore, it is important to note that over the past 2 years, the state has reduced or eliminated funding to the city by nearly $4 million regarding funding for distressed communities and pilot payment in lieu of taxes. This reduction has further stressed the city's ability to provide further funding. The proposed budget from the mayor should not have come as a surprise. You may recall that last year when the new contracts came before the council for ratification, the mayor urged caution and pause to reflect on the overall cost to the schools. He was criticized for raising such a point. It was never a question for the mayor if the teachers weren't deserving of compensation. It was a question of how the personnel costs fit in the overall scheme of school spending for employees, programs, student services, and things like art, music, sports. At a July 18th, 22 Finance Committee meeting, Council President Marino asked the school's chief financial officer if the 3-year contract was something the schools could afford financially, and he responded, quote, correct. She then asked, even if the schools were level funded for those 3 years, could they afford those increases again? And the reply was correct. At that same meeting, Councilmember Renzulli asked the superintendent if the contracts were not dependent on an increase in dollars from the city, and that the schools would not cut any programs such as middle school sports. The superintendent confirmed that understanding in saying yes. With those types of assurances, the mayor stepped back from his concern. The mayor believes strongly that with increased state aid to schools this year, along with local dollars and other available revenue, we have the leadership to keep schools properly funded and managed. It should also be noted that our school employee taxpayers and all other taxpayers are committing great support to Cranston schools in the next capital budget, with more than $40 million for the last phase of the new Garden City School and Eden Park School. There's also additional funding to get the new Gladstone School off the ground. In the next year's debt service costs, the mayor has planned for scheduled school bond payments of $1.545 million from the city side of the budget. Certainly, as we could see, in some respects, we're not level funding schools. It's just coming out of city pockets for different reasons. It is no secret that the mayor and school leaders are concerned about the significant increases in the next few years for the cost of schools being built and other school projects from the $147 million where the bond issues were approved back in 2020. Nonetheless, the mayor's expressed the full support for the $147 million for these projects, including the Gladstone School. Lastly, it is critical to note that upon taking office in January 2021, the mayor was dealt with the hand of having to work through the difficult financial challenges of a pandemic. Add to that financial deficits, runaway inflation, and reductions and eliminations in state funding. The bottom line is that the mayor has his hands tied in not being able to provide funding as he would otherwise wish to do, especially to our schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director. I would just respectfully ask members of the audience this evening if we could keep comments to ourselves. That way the meeting tonight can run smoothly. I would appreciate that. At this time, we will open it up to the committee. I'm gonna question. First, Superintendent, there are a lot of people that have sat that past couple months. There's no one that I have more confidence in than you when you come before us, as well as you, Mr. Balducci, and the department as a whole, including all of the educators, school professionals, and everyone that is a part of the Cranston school system. So thank you for all that you do. The number before us this evening from the city side is 98.5. What would you like that number to be?
Superintendent, I'm sorry, do you mind just turning on the microphone?
Really. When we put together our budget, we provide a number that we feel, again, is the minimum requirement to cover. So the $2.4 million that we had asked for. By allowing us that funding, we would be able to keep a healthy kind of savings account, the rainy day fund. We would not necessarily, we would not need to make programmatic or staffing cuts. So obviously, any increase would be greatly appreciated. I can't sit here and say, I want this, that, and the other. That's not, it's not in my nature to be greedy. But I would ask that any consideration for increased funding would be put directly to the budget to make sure that some of the fears that you folks have, that parents have, that my staff have, that would hurt children, that would be averted. So again, just to fully fund what we've asked for would be, you know, amazing and wonderful. But I'm also a realist, and I know that you all have limitations as well. So any increased funding would be great. And we are worried about using our, it's like, you know, wiping out our savings. So
Thank you. Mr. Balducci, the 98.5 that's proposed in fiscal year 24, is that 98.5, is that worth the same amount as 98.5 in 2023?
No. If you're a homeowner, clearly the answer is no. If you do business in Cranston, the answer is no. I mean, as was alluded to by Chairman Trafficante, just the cost of utilities is going up, just the cost of doing business. My office sees it directly. When we have to buy supplies for our prices we were used to getting are not there anymore. So what we've had to do is either one of two things: try to find money elsewhere in the budget to accommodate their supply needs, or just the answer is no. We can't buy as much. So the 98.5 million is not the same as it was 2 years ago, last year. It's not.
Would it be fair to say it's effectively less in a way?
Yes.
Thank you. To Director Zadelis. If the city council or the administration wanted to come up with the $2.4 million, purely hypothetical, just so we have the math in front of us, and I don't expect you to pull out a calculator and crunch it right now. What would the mayor is proposed a tax increase of 1.9. How much more would the rate need to go up to come up with that 2.4? It does, again, answer doesn't need to be right now. I don't expect it, but as soon as you whenever you can get us that number. At this time, are there any questions from members of the committee? Council Vice President Farkas.
Thank you. Is there anything we can do about that noise? Okay. Thank you. All right. Superintendent, good evening. Nice to see you here. Thank you for all the work that you and your staff do. And as well, it's nice to see a full house full of educators and Cranston School Department staff. I want to thank you all for obviously for all the work that you have done, continue to do. And it's certainly not an easy job. I think a lot of you already know that I'm a mother of two. My daughter graduated from Cranston East last year. You're currently a URI student, and my son's at Parkview. And so I have been a Cranston Public School supporter, not only as a mother, but obviously coming in from my perspective as a city council member. Just a few questions that I have, and maybe a few of them are more possibly just clarification, and some of them were from just parents that had kind of asked me, and I said that I would definitely go ahead and ask you, although I did say to the parents that I know your office is always more than welcome to answer any questions that the parents have, but I didn't want to shut down their questions, and I said that I would ask them. So a few of them, I'll start off with kind of the one of the ones that I got in from a parent, just this evening was regarded to the ESSER funds. There were funding that came in within the last few years. Do you anticipate any additional ESSER fund dollars coming in?
So right now, no, but I did ask the state if there was a possibility if districts did not use their full allocation, other districts, if they were going to reallocate the dollars and make those available for, I'll say, round 2 or 3. I did not get any solid answer, but I did ask. So we're never embarrassed to ask for more dollars. But we haven't heard anything, no.
Okay, thank you. The other question that I have is, within your proposed budget for the FY '24 on here, in terms of vacancies, do you anticipate having any vacancies at all for next year? And currently, are there any vacancies in the current fiscal year right now as we speak?
We do have vacancies just because we have not been able to find staffing in certain areas that are difficult to staff.
Can I add something? Sorry to that. And one of the sections that I was asked was particularly about nurses as well.
Right now, we don't have any vacancies, I don't think. Is that it? Yeah.
And then additionally,
So
in terms of
in
next year,
general, we do have vacancies. For example, we've been looking for full-time school psychologists. I think we've had the posting up for the better part of a year. Yeah. So there are certain specific areas that we have vacancies, but just to clarify before we get into all of the questions, if our funding remains level as it is, we will then go through each and every single possible staffing level and make sure that we are operating at peak efficiency with that. So we currently have 49 people who we have notified that they are laid off. So we would have to look at those 49 folks and see who it's necessary to bring back and who it's not necessary to bring back.
thank you. The other question that I have is, I know that there's been, as a parent, I get the emails coming in regarding free reduced lunch, right? And the balance probably that is currently, that we currently have, or that the school department currently has. What is the current balance year to date on the free to reduced lunch? I know that a few years ago, pre-COVID, there was a balance, and there was also a very similar probably scenario or situation that we were in as well, and saying to parents, like, please pay. And there's been some legislative bills at the State House in hopes to have free reduced, free lunch in general for all of our students. How are we currently dealing with that, and how do you anticipate that affecting your budget at all?
That is a huge problem for us. So pre-COVID, we ran about, when we shut down in March of 2020, we had about a $92,000 debt owed on students who had received lunch and hadn't paid for it for one reason or another. Then for 2 years or 2+ years, the government enabled us to give universal free lunch. So I think everyone can understand the economic impact of giving things away for free to everyone and then suddenly saying, oh, now we're going to take that back and now we want, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. So at the beginning of this year, we began really trying to stress to families that lunch was no longer free. You had to fill out the annual paperwork, whether it be literally a paper copy or an online copy. We have discovered over the year that our food service company who assists us in processing all of that, there was a software malfunction that is causing a lot of the families who would normally get free lunch to have their application rejected for one reason or another. We are currently in the process of going through every single one of the students who have a balance to see if I won't go into the technical details of it, but there are 2 or 3 platforms that are supposed to talk to each other, and send out emails notifying parents, and from our side, we assumed those emails were going out until we realized nobody was getting any of the emails or notifications. So the debt was incurring and parents were unaware. So now we're in the process of communicating with parents and trying to get them back on track with their free and reduced lunch applications. But I think that 2-year pause in between really did a disservice to the municipalities that rely on the income for that. So we're working with our staff to try and reach out to parents and do a lot of the outreach. Whatever debt we do incur, we are allowed to carry for a couple of years and try to chip away at that. However, the school lunch program is called, it's an enterprise fund, which means whatever we make from it goes back into a very restricted fund and can only be used for certain items. So if we had, $5 million in the school, which we don't, but if we had $5 million in the school lunch enterprise fund, we can't take that money and use it for our budget. So it has to be used very specifically according to federal and state guidelines within the program itself. So ironically, we cannot use the profit that we make to pay off the debt to our fund. So that becomes our debt. So that's why we're working really hard with families. We've encouraged them, if they aren't free and reduced lunch eligible, to work on a payment plan. So we're trying to do the outreach, but it's really kind of unfair to families, and we recognize that because of a technical glitch that we were unaware of till about January. It's hard to say, well, now you owe us $300. So
Right.
we're working on that.
Okay, thank you. And so the other question that I have is, I have just 2 more to go, is if there is a surplus, where would you actually allocate the dollar amounts within the budget at all? Are we able, like, when you have, like, I guess my first question should have been, was there a surplus last year at all? And
Yes, there was about $200,000. Yes.
And so, I don't, as we are, as a council, are we allowed to ask at all for like, the actuals at all, and then also find out where some of the surpluses went?
So similar to the city side, any unspent budget dollars just go to what we determine as the bottom line, the rainy day fund. And it sits there for future use. And then I believe, as Mr. Catone has mentioned, we're already dipping into that surplus dollars at a tune of about 2.9 million. So we are using those funds that we've accumulated over time to help us balance next year's budget. So to answer your question, I think that's what we're using those funds for.
Okay. And then, in terms of, so the actuals, in terms of the actuals, are we able to request those actuals, like where we are year to date from the school, or not?
If you're asking where I'm going to be at the end of June 30th of this year,
Where we are year to date?
we're within budget. So again, hopefully if the trend continues for the next 3 months, I see us having a balanced budget, but to be able to give you a surplus number at this point, I'm not in a position to do that now.
Okay. So are there any lines that you have within your current budget that you see going extremely over?
Sure. Overtime is one. Chairman Trafficante mentioned outside tuitions is another area that I'm in deficit within that area of the budget. But there are other areas that I'm also running a surplus. So again, as was alluded to earlier, I have over, close to 12,000 expenditure accounts. So to try to manage those and try to say, okay, am I doing well? Where am I doing poorly? Hopefully at the end of the day, it gets me to a balanced budget.
All right. So, and then Mr. Balducci, just a question on here in terms of the 7 million in terms of the IEP. Is it a total of about roughly $67,000 per student that we pay to send to send to outside of the city?
That's on the low end. Actually, in some cases, we spend close to $120,000 to send a child out of district
Okay.
to a special ed placement. So on average, if you take the high and the low, it's probably closer more to about 85,000 per.
It is, and is it because we in Cranston, like, why are we sending some of the students to IEP? Is it like, if you can just educate me on that, is it because we don't have enough resources? Is it just, again, I'd like to be just educated on it for the parents who are asked.
So a student who has an IEP, any of the placement or programming decisions are made by a group of qualified folks who come from a variety of clinical or educational backgrounds. Along with the parents, they decide placement and services. So yes, there are some students that are either so medically fragile that we cannot support them here. We have students at Meeting Street School or things like that.
Got it.
So those are some of our outside placements. The Sargent Center, Bradley Hospital, Meeting Street, so
Okay.
more significant needs of students that a district couldn't possibly supply the entire spectrum of need for every student. We have some students who drive out of state every day because the program that is necessary for them is not in even Rhode Island. So those are not determined, those needs and those placements are not determined by Joe or me or my staff. That is determined by a group of highly qualified individuals who make those decisions based on a variety of factors. And it is our legal obligation to make sure that every student is in a program that meets their needs. And I'm not picking on that line item, but those are one of those things that we have no way of predicting. We could have a family of 3 students move in who have significant needs. We don't know that's coming, but once they're there, we are obligated to make sure they are serviced. So that's why there's a great deal of variability within that line item.
Thank you. And my last question is, there's, looking at the detail expenditures, Chester Bowers is obviously still operating because we have the students from Garden City there. For the next fiscal year, there's still some line items that are still within Chester Barrows, but then also still with Garden City School.
Yep.
Can you just like elaborate? I know some of them are zeroed out, some of them are
Yes.
not. I know, for example, like gas and electricity is still on there, and I'm sure it's too for the weatherization, everything else, but
Right.
there's still some on there. I was just curious if you would be able to at least provide me with, are we not, when are we anticipating actually opening Garden City? If everything goes well, actually,
Okay.
because that might answer my question.
So right now, Garden City School, the students who are at the old Garden City School are at Chester Barrows. Once Garden City opens, which will occur in September, so we should have it substantially complete by May, and then over the summer, we'll move all of the equipment into Garden City. Then Garden City and the students who are currently at Waterman will all go to Garden City School, which will leave Barrows and Waterman open. The students from Gladstone, because Gladstone will be taken down. So the students from Gladstone will then be divided into Barrows and Waterman as for swing space while the new Gladstone is being built. Once Gladstone is built, then Barrows and Waterman will come offline.
Okay, all right, so that explains obviously their dollar amounts within the budget for both,
The building.
yeah, and then having still both schools in operations clearly. All right, that's all I have for now. I will refrain from asking the other questions for lack of time and circle back later on. Thank you so much.
This time I'd like to recognize Council President Jessica Marino.
Thank you. Thank you to the superintendent. Thank you for Mr. Balducci for all of your hard work, for the team that you lead and do a very great job for. and with. And thank you to the members of the public that have come here this evening, those who work for the school department, teachers, custodians, bus drivers, and more, and those members of the public that are here just as involved residents. And also thank you to the members of the school committee. You're always welcome your input, and we thank you for your contributions this evening. You know, Councilman Donegan had stated earlier his respect for the job that you do, and I have to agree with him. You've always held my utmost respect for what you're able to do with what you have. I'm also a person, as you may know, and many may know, is that I don't like to promise things that we can't deliver. And it's realistic that this is going to be a very difficult task before us to come up with that kind of increase, despite it being, you know, something that is very much in need. I know this has come up in past years, the issue of retention. Not just with respect to the teachers, but also, for example, bus drivers and custodians. And I would just like to have a little, you know, insight as to where that currently stands in terms of retention. What's the most difficult positions to fill? Has there been improvements? That kind of thing. I think that would be informative for me.
I'm looking over at Mr. Crudale. He may I may want to call the bullpen on this one. So retention, money and way of life and quality of life is critical in any position. However, we've had trouble retaining staff from custodians, bus drivers, teachers, teacher assistants, all the way to administrators. Money is a factor. I can't sugarcoat that. But it's also a very difficult and unappealing career now for people. And that's really unfortunate. And it, you know, hurts me to say that, but like our brothers and sisters in the police and fire, public service isn't exactly lauded as it once was. So making sure that we attract and retain folks with a good quality of working condition, in addition to fair salaries and benefits, you know, it's the whole package. Money is a piece of it. I would be naive to say it's not, but it's some of those intangible things. They can go to our neighboring district to our south and earn $10,000 probably right out of the gate, but they don't. They stay. Because I think it's the culture that we've grown here in Cranston, and it's happened long before I've sat in this chair. So we want to maintain the quality of a working place for those folks. Now, that I will go back to the comment I made to Councilwoman Vargas that we do have openings just because we can't find people for certain jobs. We try to make sure we have a balanced package, and we are competing against districts. We lost, I can think of one particular young science teacher, grew up in Cranston. Her whole family is here. She's outstanding. She went to Lincoln and her foot in the door made $13,000 more. That's really hard to compete with. We're cute and fun to be with, but $13,000 is a lot of money when you're starting out.
Right.
So, you know, those are the realities. We deal with it with administrators. I've currently, I've lost 3 or 4 administrators over the years going to different districts, different positions, some, you know, so it runs the gamut of retaining people and attracting folks from around the state, and districts are all fishing out of the same very small pond of candidates. So making sure that our contracts are fair and offer a fair not only wages, but benefits is critical, because it is not like it was years ago when you had to know somebody to get a job. It's not like that anymore. We're hoping we know people who want jobs. Oh, he's here.
I usually don't need a mic, but I would just add that the pandemic
you know, to echo superintendent's earlier comments, has had a negative impact on retention. Not only that, we've seen many teachers leaving the profession, you know, and going and choosing a different profession. You know, we look at our student teacher population, there's very low numbers coming out of school and students going into teaching. But we also have, the question was asked about vacancies. We have not been able to fully staff our teacher assistants throughout the year. We have a large number of vacancies with teacher assistants. And it's kind of you know, with custodians and bus drivers, it's an ongoing process. We are participating in a RIDE job fair, which will be taking place on Sunday, May 7th and Monday, May 8th at the Crown Plaza. And last time I checked, every district in the state will be at this job fair. So we'll be competing against all of them as well. So it is it's more difficult now than it's ever been. I know many of us in this room had to sub many years before we even considered for a job, and now
Right.
we can't even find
Right.
subs. So it's a very difficult time for all the positions in the district. And to echo the superintendent's comments, I mean, obviously we're competing against salaries. So, you know, people have to, you know, make a good salary. And although many of us are dedicated to the city of Cranston, we fully understand when someone does what they do for the, you know, for the good of their family. So it's become very difficult. I can tell you, you did ask about specific positions. Math and science are incredibly difficult to fill. Math is probably the most difficult. We've had a position in NEL all year that we have not been able to fill a math teacher. So there are specific areas that, you know, kids are just not going into any longer for education.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you been able to quantify whether or not, you know, objectively, the number of positions, the retention has improved in the last couple of years or gotten worse? I'm just
Gotten
curious.
worse. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I would say, and I'm proud of it, I would say phys ed is one area that we have no problem finding people. But, but I would say other than that, and again, as the superintendent has said, we've lost many administrators over the last couple of
Yeah.
years too, and you don't see people going into that as well, which makes it very difficult. When you're opening in new schools and you have to have, you have to have the right administrators in place. So I would say there's really no specific area that has been easier to retain teachers.
Has it gotten better though, the last like couple of years? I'm just curious, like now that.
Not yet.
No, okay.
Not yet.
That was really what I'm trying to understand. Yep, okay.
No, it has
But,
not.
and it's not, because like I said, I hear just like everybody else, we know of people or someone who's been a teacher for a while, but exactly, there's a different opportunity and maybe they want to change career path. And I'm just trying to separate fact from fiction. And that's what I'm trying to get a sense of, and-
I will say, I think, and I had the opportunity to speak at a college course at URI. I will say that I think the numbers are slowly increasing, the amount of students going back into education.
But that'll take a
It's
while.
gonna take time.
Yeah,
before they
yep.
come out.
Okay. Another question I have, I think, I'm pretty sure it came up last year too, is the career in tech, in terms of, it's not really a catch-22, but the pro and con of it in terms of the revenue that it generates and then the expense of what we're, paying out. And so I'm just wondering, where does that stand? And the other pieces, are we still on the upside of that? I know that you've increased programs in that arena.
Yeah, so over the past few years, we've probably doubled
Yeah.
the number of students and programs that we've had. We expanded them to Cranston High School East over the past 3 years, which has allowed more students to participate in the programs. And I will take a second to brag about our career and technical programs here in Cranston. They are second to none and award-winning in the state, and that is a testament to all of the folks sitting behind me too. We do have to balance because, as you know, the law changed a few years ago that students in Rhode Island, no matter where you live, you can go to any CTE program if you are accepted to it throughout the state. So if I had a child who wanted to go to Pontiac or Barrington or Westerly for a career and tech program, they can do that. And the city in which they live would have to pay tuition. So that has caused a great deal of competition. Again, now you're competing for students. Our programs do very well and we do bring in students. It becomes a problem when folks who live in Cranston apply for their child to go to a program, say at Cranston West or Cranston East. And if we have a larger number of students versus seats, we have to have a lottery. That is a state regulation. So if we have 40 seats available in our culinary program, for example, and we have 100 students apply for it, we have to have a lottery, which means the students from Cranston are also in the mix with students from outside of the district. We try to accommodate as many Cranston students as possible, but again, we have to operate within the regulations. So the tuitions we bring in, while helpful, sometimes it's a challenge for Cranston students then to get into the program. So we've expanded robotics, we've expanded culinary, we've expanded medical pathways because they were our more popular programs. So we've tried to expand based on the need. But I do believe we are on the better side of the CTE tuition system. So Joe, you find the direct numbers.
So again, as tuition coming into the district, because again, we are a host community that has a CTE center, budgetarily, we bring in about $1.6 million. On the expense side, because as the superintendent mentioned, when we received notification that a Cranston resident has chosen to go to another school, the way it works, I get a tuition bill, and I have to then pay that district. Just to throw some district names out there: Coventry, East Providence, North Kingstown, Warwick, Gloucester, Barrington, Pawtucket, Smithfield. So those are just sample districts that, again, residents of the city have chosen to send their son or daughter to that particular school system because of a pathway CTE program. Those expenses right now in next year's budget, around $475,000. So as the superintendent mentioned, we take in about 1,516 and we spend out about 475.
And the state reimbursement, the reason why I asked that question, and I know we talked about it last time too, is because if we're on the upside of that equation, positive side, then it would be advantageous to us if the state increased the reimbursement rate. And I'm just not sure if there's been any discussions with the state and where that stands. No.
Yeah, the superintendents also work with the Career and Tech Board of Trustees, of which I'm the vice chair. And we try to set tuitions, not we, the state sets the tuitions. So the tuitions are also variable throughout the state. So a student coming from a district that has high poverty pays a different amount versus a student coming from a higher socioeconomically advantaged district. So there's, all of that kind of comes into play when students move from place to place. That includes even students who come into our charter school. I have it.
Thanks. The other question that I had will first come with a compliment. With respect to your use of the collaboratives with health insurance, and you provide an exemplary situation in terms of going from not using that type of system to then implementing that system with the great work that Mr. Balducci has done in that regard, and seeing a good improvement. And I know that I've been one of the proponents to try and encourage greatly and continue with the administration that as a city, we implement a similar effort and join a collaborative to make our health insurance costs more predictable and sustainable. With respect to your utilization of the collaborative, you know, that changes from year to year, where does are you still performing well with your use of the collaborative? Where does that stand? I'm just curious.
Sure. So, we are proud of the collaborative we are a member of. Currently, we have reserve dollars of about $3.2 million. That's through February. Because of that, that area of the budget, we have level funded, so we have not increased health or dental. But I say that with caution because it doesn't take much to actually eliminate a $3.2 million surplus. So that's an area I'm concerned about going into next year. But right now, again, we have a healthy surplus there and hopefully that will grow. And this collaborative has been creative in trying to manage its health costs. And I use the example of, so basically just an example is the rebate, the drug rebate dollars. So approximately 45 months ago, we negotiated with Blue Cross where we told them that we wanted to keep the rebate, the pharmacy rebate dollars. Because again, the way it worked before that, Blue Cross as an example or United Health, they would keep it. So, but we thought that they were making money off of us. And so we negotiated a new agreement. So then they came back to us and said, well, pre-decision, because they manage our program, they would charge us an admin rate. So they were charging us about $22 per member per month is how it's defined. So then we said, okay, give us the rebate dollars. And they said, well, Joe, instead of charging you $22 per member per month, that's now going to be $43.50 per member per month. So we said, that's fine, because we were still of the opinion that the rebate dollars were going to be more substantial than the added costs added onto the admin rate. So we're proud to say that in Cranston's particular case, while we did spend approximately $1.6 million more for them to manage the program, through February of this year, our pharmacy rebate is just under $5.1 million. So we were to the good of about $3.8 million. So there's an example where this particular collaborative has taken steps to try to be creative, to try to manage the operations. And I think that was a good example of one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to, like I said, I really think that that's the way for us to go. But it makes a lot of fiscal sense in offsetting the cost and keeping it stable. The last thing that I just want to say, I would be remiss if I did not, is that I too am a proud mother of 2 Cranston Public School students, one of which is set to graduate this year from Cranston West, and one who will be entering that school coming up. 2 different personalities, but both loving their Cranston Public Schools, and we as parents do too. So thank you.
Councilman Campipiano.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I want to thank all the Cranston educators in the room. Both of my children went through the Cranston school system and my 2 grandchildren are currently going through the Cranston school system and they love it. So thank you very much for your hard work and all you do. My question is for Mr. Balducci. You said you're going to use close to 3 million of the rainy day funds. What does that leave you if you do use that?
Not knowing the results of this particular fiscal year, hopefully we're going to add to it, but it's going to leave me with about $500,000. So clearly that's not enough to run a school system.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For reference, what the city side, the rainy day fund is running at what to date?
Mr. Chairman, the rainy day fund, I'm assuming Mr. Balducci is speaking of fund balance.
Yes.
The city's overall rainy day fund is approximately $14 million. And if I just may caution you, similar to Mr. Balducci, the gauge of a fund balance in terms of such, our bond rating. Right now, the city has a goal of reaching 5%. Nowadays, that goal should be 10%. We're below 5. It's about a little less than, or approximately 4%. So,
Thank you, Director. That 5% is
through
required
the chair, I was corrected, a mandate. We have to get to 5%.
by the charter.
John, I'm sorry. If I can interrupt, and Solicitor Igliosi, if you want to converge on this issue, just so we don't derail, we need to stick to the agenda item for this evening. So I just want to make sure we stay on topic if you concur. Yep, thank you.
Councilwoman Jermaine.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank all of you for being here this evening. Thank you for a job well done. So as you know, I have 3 children in public school in Cranston, and they are happy, still happy. So I would like that continued. So I have a few questions. It's regarding the construction. I would like to ask, what are your concerns? Because school committee member Dominic talked about the construction and talk about the reimbursement when we funded those schools. So please, enlighten me, please, in terms of those bonds that were voted on and where we are at and what should be done and what are those barriers and where what can be done.
The bonds that were approved in 2020, those projects were developed over the course of 2018 and 19, submitted to the Department of Ed. We went through the whole bond procedure. So when those came up for a vote in 20, the estimates for those buildings were based on prices, at the time of the development of the projects. And we won't, keep rehashing the fact that over the past 3 years, costs of everything have gone up. We're experiencing right now about a 30% increase in construction costs. So to the point that Councilman Donegan made earlier, $98.5 million 2 years ago isn't the same $98.5 million now. So our costs have increased, which have caused us to, the term that Mr. Collins uses is value engineer. So what we have done is for every project that we have, he and his team of professionals from Jacobs, they go through every project, write down, and I am not exaggerating, to screws and nails in every project to see where costs can be cut and to make sure we stay within budget. So the voters approved $147 million. We cannot go beyond that spending for the city. So right now we are operating within that framework. Our reimbursement runs between 69 and 74% on the dollar for every dollar we spend. So that's why when Mr. Fusco was talking about the cost of buildings, if the building, say for Garden City, is 46 approximately $1 million, then the city really is only responsible for paying for 15 million of that at the end of the day. So that's why we're, and I often use the term, we're getting it on sale, right? We're getting buildings 70% off. So that's why we're trying to stay on task with these projects. Am I answering your question or am I just rambling?
For example, if the construction is complete,
Yeah.
when do you have the reimbursement and who control this money,
Okay.
where this money goes?
I gotcha. So once a project is complete, we put in for what we call housing aid reimbursement. That takes about a year to get our reimbursement. The reimbursement comes directly to the city. I would assume that the reimbursement then goes to our debt service. That was,
Can the city, we use this money to invest in another project?
that would be a question for.
Through the chair to the counselor, as the superintendent, stated, it comes in the form of revenue to the city. But on the expense side, what you'll see is our debt service going up. So as an example, as the superintendent stated, we will issue $130 million worth of bonds to be paid over the next 20 years, a mortgage on your house. Someone's going to give us a portion back, so we'll deposit that, but we're still paying debt service. So the budget will include net debt service, net of the reimbursement.
Okay, my question, you talk about the 30%. Is when we have the bond, so should we apply right away, or it's because we wait? Because we didn't know, we cannot, just do that we will have this high rates for now. But was it possible to apply earlier on and we would not have to pay those 30%? Because as of now, we have to look at it at this 30%.
So two answers to that. One is the costs went up almost immediately once COVID hit, supply chain issues, things like that. I'll give you a very tangible example. When Garden City School was being built, the original plans were for steel structures in the roof. I'm sure they have a very specific name. I can't recall them right now. So there were steel structures, right? Okay. Because we couldn't get them, it had to be redesigned. In the time that it cost to redesign a building and then find a different way to build that, those costs went up. So that kind of throws the plans off when you have to do that. So as we're moving along and the costs are increasing, we're trying to redesign so that, again, we understand we have to operate within the $147 million bond. So everything we design and build has to stay within that. And we're very conscious of that. We do not get reimbursed until the project is complete. So whether it's Cranston High School West, Eden Park, Garden City, those projects need to be fully done before we can submit for reimbursement to the state. Now, I will say that the Department of Ed, we met with them, I'd say about a month and a half ago. And I expressed to them that the city is in a financial area where some cash flow would be beneficial to them. So in the case of Eden Park, which was a 3-phase renovation. So the first part is the part that everyone's visited and has seen. The second part is what's going on now, which is the new gymnasium and cafeteria. Normally what would happen is all 3 phases would have to be complete before we would see any of that reimbursement. In the case of Eden Park, that first part was done and we were reimbursed for that.
So I have to stop 1 second. So that's mean every phase that is completed, you have the investment right away?
Once it's complete, then you apply for the reimbursement and that money then would go back to the city. So in the case of Eden Park, technically sections 2 and 3 should have been done both, both sections of the, both phases needed to be done before we were reimbursed. The Department of Education agreed that once that second phase is done, because we indicated to them that we're putting a pause on that part. So that second phase, once that is substantially complete, which will be again in the summer, we can apply for reimbursement and get some cash flow back to the city on that phase of the renovation, which normally they want the whole thing done before they give you money back. And I would think, and this is just my assumption, that it's a good faith effort that they know that the money being invested by the state is being done to complete projects.
So if that's what the city will lose in case that
Right.
dispose stays and we not completed those phases.
What would be the rent, you mean the reimbursement on that phase 3? I have that. No, I do. Let me just- That's one of Mike's pages. Give me 1 second. I do have the reimbursement. You want to do that math for me quick? Any math teachers in the group tonight? Here we go. 69% of 14 million. So figure 70, 70% of 14 million would be the reimbursement. 9.6 million.
So is that true for each of the projects? So that will be for only Eden Park.
Correct.
So what about Gladstone?
Gladstone's a more significant, it's like the voice of God behind me. Why don't you come up here, please? Oh, there it is. All right. There we go. So Garden City, the cost is 48.6. We're getting, so the cost to the city is 15 million. So whatever that reimbursement is. So Eden Park, phase 3 is 13 million. So the reimbursement is about, 9.6. Gladstone, so the cost is 83 million. So what's that, and then the reimbursement. 58, almost 60 million back.
So for the cost of $83 million, so 60% of $60 million will be a reimbursement. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Gladstone stands at our highest reimbursement. What the reimbursements are based on is if you hit certain markers within your project. If you are consolidating schools, they give you extra reimbursement. If you are providing early learning opportunities for students like preschool, they give you more money. If the project includes career and technical education, they give you more money back. We've hit the majority of the reimbursement markers with with Gladstone, except for career and technical education, just because it's an elementary school and we normally do that in the higher levels. But most of the other reimbursement points that we could get, we've acquired. So we stand at about a 74% reimbursement on the Gladstone project.
Thank you. So Mike, I have a question for the administration. For example, I know with the increase in the weight, 30%, because this $147 million, we did not put this bond totally yet. We just put a part of it. So how much we have left if we put this on now?
I'm going to defer to my colleagues here on that one.
Through the chair to the counselor, to date, we've issued $50 million in notes that are anticipated coming due this August. Cash flow wise, we'll be issuing before the end of this fiscal year another 40 million to pay for progress payments of the schools the superintendent spoke to. So by June 30th, we'll have approximately $90 million worth of bond anticipation notes by the end of this fiscal year.
Thank you. So I asked this question because I really need the clarity. So I know we are in a very unique situation. But I always think like this time, as a lot of us, we still buy houses, right? Because we want a house, even though the rate is high, because we know we need some place. And that's why I think the investment for our kids, it's worth it. And also if we will have this in reimbursement, my next question, when we have the reimbursement, can we pay off the rates, or sometimes like you have a credit card, you can just give, pay it off.
Right.
Would you pay it off? Would you be able to pay it off and without penalty, or decrease administration?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You have to answer it. I just understand what she's saying. That once you get that cash reimbursement back to the city, can the bond be paid off immediately instead of amortizing it over 30 years?
Through the chair to the counselor, it's a catch-22 situation. We would have to issue the full amount in speaking to Eden Park, where the superintendent was talking about $14 million is the gross amount of the construction. To get a reimbursement, we would have had, we'd have to bond it. So we already have an amortization schedule. The reimbursement from the state comes in 20 installments over the 20 years. So there isn't a cash flow to call, you're referring to calling the bonds. They don't give it all at once. They amortize the reimbursement. So there isn't the ability to call the bond.
Thank you so much. All right, so I have one more question. My other question is about the distress funding. So as it looks like we lost this aid from the state. I would like to know how long we've been benefited from this fund, and what was the criteria that make us qualify for that? And now what has changed that make us lose this?
I think that's a question also for the administration, but I will tell you that the state's determination that we are no longer a distressed community, it does have an impact on the city budget, but it also has an impact on our state aid and the money that we get. So when we talked about earlier, the variation in state aid to Cranston, the state in their some formula, they determined that the city's wealth has increased. So that's why we're getting less money for our schools. The impact on the distressed community, again, I defer to the administration on what it was previously and what criteria they used to determine that.
So it's not under your purview?
No.
And just for the purposes of what
Right.
was advertised, we do have to keep it limited to the school budget. So if you want to comment on how it impacts state aid specifically, as you have, that's perfectly fine. In my opinion, I'm not the attorney. But if we get into distressed community in terms of the city budget, we have to stay away from that.
To the chair, we talk about the state aid that has decreased, and the reason of that, the state it has decreased. So that's the question. We cannot talk about that? Because if we have a decrease, we need to know why we have the decrease. So that's explanation.
If you wish, if the committee wishes to discuss the state aid, by all means discuss it. But we can't discuss the distressed communities line item that is within the school. That is within the city operating budget revenues. I don't know if the solicitor wants to opine on that, but by all means, Councilwoman and Superintendent, discuss the state aid.
So last year, I don't know if you recall, we talked about the state aid ratio. There was a formula of so the state will determine how much they think the local municipality should contribute toward education and what the state share should be. Over the past couple of years, the balance of that ratio has tipped toward more local dollars being used in the education formula. Again, that's a formula done by the Department of Administration and Revenue, I believe, in the state. So that changed a couple of years ago, which caused us, again, to kind of question like you are, like, wait a minute, so we're losing the distressed communities money and we're taking a hit on the state aid because in the eyes of the state, there is more taxable wealth. Is that the correct? Okay. There is more taxable wealth within the city. Therefore, they're saying, well, then there should be a larger local contribution. That's my understanding of the, I'm getting kind of one of these from the solicitor. So
Thank you.
that's my brief economics lesson for this tonight.
Thank you. So my question will be next time for the administration, what can we do? Because apparently we do not have the money. So if we do not have the money and we lose money, something has to be done. So what can be done? What you in the school committee and the administration, would you be able to sit down to see where we miss something? What can we done? Because if it says we are wealthy on paper, but we are struggling, so we are here to solve problems.
Correct.
So where this wealth is? So, and at the end of the day, it's our children that will pay the consequences. It's our system, school systems that will pay the consequences. So we need to figure out what was going on or what is going on and how we can find a solution.
Correct. Thank you.
And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilwoman Renzulli.
You. To Councilwoman Jermaine's point, I think that it is relevant that we're not getting as much distressed community aid because the less money that we have, the less money we have to give. So if the state decides that they want to give us that money with their $610 million surplus, I think that we could share some of it with the schools. So that's just a point that I would like to make. Superintendent, did the state say why they were cutting school aid to the city of Cranston specifically? Because I know one of the school committee members mentioned Barrington. I think it was Vice Chair Fusco, and Barrington is a very wealthy community. So it just doesn't seem to add up across the board every year when they talk about the funding of schools. So could you elaborate on that?
So for about a decade, there was a school funding formula that was agreed upon through the General Assembly years ago. Because, and for those of us who have been around for 20-something years, there was never a set amount of money. A district would have to wait. It was like playing the lottery. You didn't know what you were getting. So years ago, they decided to come up with a school funding formula because it was a lopsided distribution of money throughout the state. That lasted for about 10 years. And it was good because districts could predict, again, not to the penny, but could somewhat predict what they were getting from the state. Well, that formula really was meant to only last about 10 years. So it's done now. And it ended, I believe, during COVID. So we're kind of back to, spin the wheel and see what we get. It is based on our number of pupils, how many students, again, apply for the free and reduced lunch, which gets back to your point that if we don't get an accurate count on that, it's detrimental to us. So we're working on all that. There are some markers for students, multi-language learners. We get some money for statewide transportation, which kind of comes to us as a credit. So there are some things that we qualify for that will get extra money, but really it's up to the governor's purview to see where the money lands in larger amounts. In previous years, when we and I'm not trying to get political here, but we had folks at the State House in the House of Representatives who had positions of power. We did better. And now that's, we're looking at different people. As we said, Warwick is getting 3.2 million. So, hey, don't hate the player, hate the game, but that's how it rolls. So we're looking at the governor's distribution. So that's his budget to the General Assembly. Now it's with them. They can, and I've sent out appeals to our legislative folks, just saying like, we need some help because now you're shifting the burden to your Cranston constituents rather than the statewide group with a $600 million healthy surplus. So I agree with you. It's, we kind of wait around until December, January to see what we're getting, and it's hard to predict.
Thank you. I always ask this question, but I'm going to ask again because it was really well illustrated this year. Electricity is estimated to go up $452,000. So there are several programs that I'm just wondering if we're participating in through the Department of Energy. Are we participating in anything? The accelerator, the school lighting accelerator program?
So to answer your question, okay, sure. So to answer your question, we do. We also utilize the services of a partner, Silent Sherpa is their name. So what they do for us, they assist in giving me some data as far as budget building is concerned for next year's rates. They also sometimes every 6 months go out to market, see what the rates are. And then they come back to us and say, hey, you're in a position, I think you should lock in for 6 months, or they are of the opinion that it looks good for the next year. So those are the type of conversations we have. Again, every 6 months or so with them. So that's what they do for us. But yes, by all means, if there's $3, I'm the first one to be there to ask for it.
So are we participating in the public school energy equity program?
Ed Collins, Director of Plant Operations. Thanks. So yeah, we did all the energy audits probably about 7 years ago. Then we did them on our master plans. 99% of our lighting is all LED already. The other thing is we belong to a major solar farm that's in Johnston right now, and that kind of generates close to $250,000 in cost avoidance for us every year. So we're taking advantage of everything out there. Yep.
Are we in the public school heat pump water heater accelerator and the building
We
automation
have all the
system?
RFD circulator pumps, everything. Obviously, our new designs are very efficient. We actually even looked into thermal heating at Gladstone, but the cost was too much. Sometimes there's a balance, right? We want really efficient stuff, but the overall initial cost is way too much for that. So some of it's kind of a little bit of a balancing act.
Trying to find the right return on investment.
It is, but I mean, again, the other problem is the superintendent stated cost is up 30 to 40%. In a normal situation, we would be able to avoid those more elaborate systems and benefit down the road, but we just can't get into them at the initial cost.
And I know the governor, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, put something out about $10 million to give to schools for energy. Are we involved in that? I'm sure we're involved in everything. I'm
we
just
look
trying to
at-
get a clear picture of where we're getting money for energy from to maybe cut some of these costs.
We look at everything as far as that, but I will tell you, we're kind of way ahead of the curve as far as getting the energy audit that's done on the building. Just to let you know, like currently we're paying 10 cents for a kilowatt hour for electricity. 4 years ago, we were paying 5. That's where the issue is right now. Gas is kind of level. We're about the same, but electricity, that's the big hit right now. Yeah, I mean, as we develop the new buildings, we're getting rid of the oil and we're changing over to gas. We have 2 buildings left that run on oil. One is Eden Park, one is Rhodes.
And then, Mr. Balducci, this is for you, but I don't expect you to have the answer right now. Throughout this booklet, how it summarizes the increases, I'm just curious, Cranston Public Schools Budget District Summary 2023 to 2024. When it gives us a total increase from salaries and other compensation, employee benefits, purchase services, all the way down. Even just salaries and other compensation, I'm curious if I could get a gauge of how much of that is for classroom teachers versus how much it is for administration. Going from like 2020 to now. Because I think that is important to know, across the board. We have to start at the top down. If we've increased in administrative positions, that could be going to classrooms, I think that that is important when we're asking for more money. And then I would just also like to know, how many grant writers does this school department currently employ?
What do you mean exclusively writing grants and that's all they do?
Is there a position that is exclusively writing grants?
No,
No?
no.
So it's mixed into several people's job, or how does it work exactly? Like the city council itself has a grant writer, but we contract it out, and it works a little bit differently, obviously, than with the schools, because you get grants from RIDE and then you get from the federal government. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious how it works exactly.
Everyone kind of takes a piece. It's not necessarily a grant writing position where they would go out and say, oh, we need to fund 3 teachers. We're going to write a grant for it. The federal, state, and private grants are all managed by different people. So on our team, we have someone who manages the IDEA grant, for example. That's our special education. Individuals with Disabilities Act grant. It's not necessarily the writing of it, it's more of the management and fiscal compliance and staffing and evidence that you need to supply to whichever government entity is giving the grant. But to say we have grant writers, we really don't. I mean, a principal could write a grant for a legislative, $1,000 grant. So I guess they're considered a grant writer. So we kind of spread the wealth throughout the district with that.
Is there a position executive director of curriculum and grants?
Roxanne, yeah, yes. Yes,
So
so
does
she's in
that who
charge.
gets grants from RIDE?
That would be RIDE. The one that you are alluding to, helps us manage ESSER. Fund, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. Yeah, so
They do the
there's
fiscal
a-
management of it.
Correct, but
Okay.
that is also rolled into overseeing professional development literacy. It's not an exclusive job. It's like a slice of what they do.
Okay. Mr. Balducci, how much of the school's budget is funded by grants? Is that something, you might not be able to tell me that now either? And I don't mean to not ESSER, like grants outside of this COVID.
So this budget, does not reflect any revenue coming in from grants. This is just local dollars, local state aid, CTE revenue coming into the district, Medicaid reimbursements. So with respect to, as the superintendent just mentioned, IDEA, Title I, Title II, Perkins, there is somewhere around, excluding ESSER funds, because those are short-lived, I'll say. There's probably about $15 million worth of combination of salaries, programs, supplies, equipment.
That's coming
basically
in as there's $15 million coming in, and that's not reflected here?
Is not,
Okay, so where is that reflected?
not in this particular document. Basically, we have a reporting system where on a monthly basis, we have to notify RIDE how much we spend. At the end of the year, as part of the audit report, those dollars are identified, both revenue and expenses. But again, it is outside of this budget.
Should we have access to that at some point?
I think you do already. I mean, within.
Like within the audit probably, but could we have it in a you can send it digitally, I'll print it myself, more of a slice of just that, so we don't have to dig through the audit to
Sure.
find it. Okay. And do you think that we are getting enough grants, Superintendent? Do you think that having someone to exclusively be trying to procure that funding could help fund your budgets?
I don't know if hiring one person, only because of the vast differences we have. For example, if we want, new buses, the Director of Transportation helps to facilitate writing those grants. We really rely upon the experts in different areas. Earlier I saw our art supervisor here. I know she's very aggressive writing grants that pertain to her particular department. So really, each department, and I mean, it can go down to the chairperson of the English department, all the way up to, you know, my executive staff looking for grants. To hire one particular person just to do that, I don't think it would be efficient, because we have so many opportunities spread out throughout the district, and we are aggressively looking, you know, to shake the trees whenever we can with different things that pertain to our district. Some of them, and I will caution, they look great, but you have to put the money up first. And that's something we need to be cautious of, because sometimes, oh, you know, here's a grant, we'll apply for it, and oh, by the way, you have to put up the money and you'll get it back. Again, we have to balance if they're really suitable for our needs and our budget too, but RIDE is very good about allowing us to use the money that we get, like, for example, Title II. We have to justify all of those costs. And oftentimes folks see grant money as kind of a, you know, a pot of gold. Even ESSER money, and let's face it, we're dealing with ARPA money, ESSER money. It's a lot of money coming in, but those are restricted funds. We can't just use them. And I don't need to preach to all of you. If you use those for recurring costs, you end up paying, right? If you're not paying then, you're paying a year or two down the road. So we have to be cautious that even the money that we're getting from ESSER, we use it very responsibly, because it'll come back to kind of bite you after when you supplant money from here with grant money, and the grant money goes away, it's still going to live here. So we have to be pretty cautious with that.
Understood. We discussed this the other night with a different department who the director shared a similar, you know, metaphor. Instead of a pot of gold, he called it a free lunch. So I just want to
touchy
be
about
clear
that.
that I understand the process of grants, and that even within the state, there's grant writers, and then
Mhm.
there's department heads who help the grant writer. So we have a really good grant writer at the city who brings in millions of dollars and only, you know, works probably 10 hours a month.
Mhm.
So I think it just might be something to look into, to really procure larger funds, even from, you know, private institutions that give money. I
Yep.
mean, we could be using for some projects that are maybe built into here, you just, you know, take them out of here. They're not a reoccurring project necessarily. So it just might be some free money that is out there. But if you do not get the $2.4 million, what would you say is going to be the first to go from this budget, other than the people that you mentioned you may not bring back?
Again, Joe and I will sit down and look at, you know, you kind of start back at square A. We start doing this budget in December, which it's really kind of difficult to predict a budget when you only have spending from essentially September to November going into the next year. I'm not going to sit here and say, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this. That would be irresponsible at this point. Once we get the final number from the state, because like I said, the General Assembly still has an opportunity to maybe afford us an increase. I know the Superintendent's Association, we're lobbying for different increases based on student needs across the state. Hopefully the 600 million, maybe, you know, they're feeling generous and they give us some money. So we have to prepare for various scenarios, whether it's from this body or the state body, go back with the school committee and make the cuts that we think. And I need to tell you, anything that truly touches children, like sports, somebody mentioned, sports, those things are critical to our kids. Before I came here tonight, I was at the West Fields. I was watching Cranston West play baseball. I have a personal vested interest in Cranston West baseball team. But the field behind me had a lacrosse game. The kids are coming in, last night from track. Those are vital services that we provide for students that, that's the last thing we want to do. So what we try to do is leverage some of the energy things and stuff like that. We don't want to hurt kids. We just don't. But we do need to look at efficiencies and staffing, and I include my own team in that as well. So I don't want you to think that the folks at the top get everything and we make the folks who are sitting here suffer. That's not it. We take a haircut, everyone takes a haircut.
And I don't want you to think that that's what I was implying. I would just like to be able to compare the increases across the different departments. Thank you.
Councilman Perry.
I will be short, as I usually am. I just want you to know, and I think I speak for everyone sitting on this side, that it's difficult to sit here and listen to this. You're not just walk into a room and write a check and say, here you go. But it's not that easy for us. And as I understand it, if we wanted to give you $2.4 million, we'd have to go into the budget and find it. Take it from somebody else. So that's part of our agony with this. And I don't even know if we have the authority to raise taxes. I estimate my simple math here, and I'm not a math teacher, that we'd have to raise the tax rate another 0.75% approximately to get that money. I don't even know if we have the authority to do something like that. So I'm just trying to give you our perspective here. So I'm not sure how we're going to approach this. We don't have a lot of time. We only have like one day off and then we have an amendment night. So this is a situation where, I plan on making a lot of phone calls tomorrow, but I really don't, no promises can be made. But do we want to give you the money? I'm sure we really do. But can we give you the money? I'm not sure we can, me personally. So that's the situation we're in. And I'm going to dig a little deeper and make a couple of phone calls tomorrow, but I don't know what we are going to be able to do. And I trust that this budget, I know Mr. Balducci personally, and I know how hard he works, and I trust the numbers, but I don't know what we can do in
No.
such a short period of time.
Totally understand that. And we're not sitting here telling you to take it from another department or hurt other folks because we have, and that's not how we operate. We're team players. We're part of this city. So we fully understand that. And I'm also a taxpayer, so I get it, right? When you get that bill. We're important to the city, and I know you all realize that. It's, you have a harder job, and I know it's painful to sit here and listen to our pleas. So we fully empathize with your position.
And thank you for all your hard work. And I know a lot of you in this room. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Could I make one suggestion? And you somewhat alluded to it just now. Every year we come in last. Not this.
Not last year. Last year you were first.
Take that back then. Normally we come in kind of batting cleanup, and it is hard because you don't have a lot of time to turn it around. So. Touche. One for you, Mr. But normally we do come in last, and I think that's hard. We're the biggest one, and if you do need to make any adjustments, you don't have a.
On that point, we we are restricted by the charter in terms of the time frame for the overall budget process, and because of when we get it and when it has to be final action, which I believe is May 15th, we have to give the mayor 10 days prior to that for him to be able to veto anything, and then we have to be able to schedule something after that. So it really, it is tight. Councilwoman Renzulli. Then Council.
To Councilman Barry's point, I think it's also very difficult that we can't actually find a line and say, hey, I found $10,000 over here, and now can we put it here and you fund this and you don't do this? We just say, here's some money and you take care of it. So I think as we go through line by line, my first year, I actually went through line by line because I didn't know that. I think it would be easier for us to help if we had, more direct contact with what you know. So I don't know how, it's not really our job, but giving the money, say we give you $500,000, we don't know what that's actually going to go to and what it's not going to go to. And I think it would behoove us in the future to, and there's some school committee members have mentioned this, having some kind of a joint meeting on this in like December.
So years ago, I'll throw this out there to you. I don't know how many of you remember. Councilman Stichels had offered a restricted special education fund. So what he did was he said, okay, similar to what you're saying, instead of us just giving you $500,000, $1 million, we'll give you $250,000. We will set it aside in a restricted fund. And if your special a particular line item in, say, special education tuition, the one we talked about, that's very variable. So in your budget, if you have $1 million budgeted and you go over that, here's this restricted fund kind of sitting over here. Like almost like a savings account for us. And it's on the city side. If we needed it and we had gone over our $1 million line item and we needed to tap into it, it was there. If you didn't need it, at the end of the day, it gets reabsorbed into the budget. Again, that at the time, we thought that was a pretty creative way of kind of meeting, halfway. I don't know if Joe has anything to say about it, but.
So that was a good example where, again, and that's one of the areas that we can't predict year over year. So that area of the budget may have gone up several $100,000. But again, the administration has worked with the school department where they will say, okay, we'll put $700,000 in the reserve account. And then I work with the administration throughout the year to say, hey, I'm running within budget. That's great. Or unfortunately, I went over 200,000 of the $700,000 prediction. And then both sides confirm that data. And then basically the transfer of funds comes over to the school department. And as the superintendent mentioned, if we don't use the full reserve, it either gets carried over to the next year with the possibility of that use again, or the city just rolls it back into their, they find other uses of that money within their side of the budget.
And is that, I don't know if Mr. Fidelis needs to jump in or not as well, or legal. Does that take us out of maintenance of effort? Is it basically like kind of we're skirting around maintenance of effort? Is it legal?
Through the chair, when Councilman Stichels proposed it, the concern was that in any budget, a restricted fund that's earmarked for something, that's why it's restricted. So it would have been restricted to the schools. If it's not funded, the question was, would it become maintenance of effort by default? And we had that discussion. If we go back 3 years, the school budget had a $4 million shortfall from the state. And I did the research and I asked for a ruling, a legal ruling to say that if we left the $4 million in their budget, not that we wanted to take it, but we left it and the school didn't meet their commitment, it becomes maintenance of effort of the city, which would have then again made a big structural deficit in our budget because we would have to fund the school. So working through it as an agreement, what we did is we took it out of the school budget and we made an arrangement that if the state did fund them, it would just become part of their budget. So a part of the extra funding, that restricted funds or anything that's earmarked to the school we have to be very cautious that it doesn't become maintenance of effort, because it would only take one person to question the fact, why didn't the city pass it over? And at the time, even though it wasn't used, needed, but because it was earmarked for the school.
So, Otter, just because you're already talking, if we, in the middle of the year, found that we are running a surplus for the city, can we at that point say we'd like to give some of the money to the schools, or it needs to only be done now? And would that money become part of a maintenance of effort if we can?
I believe, based on the research, that any funding at any time, even if you did an amendment to the budget and it was transferred to the school, it becomes a maintenance of effort in the next period. The concern would be to ask the legislation to give you an avenue to keep regular maintenance of effort and allow a restricted fund up to some amount to be appropriated, but not pushed in the maintenance of effort. So it would give a twofold act. In other words, would give us an opportunity to put some money aside just in case, but it wouldn't make us commit that money for the future going forward. Correct.
And that would be agreed upon by both.
The one thing to go by, the case that was brought to the attention legally was there was a municipality that the school department had a surplus. And they sat with the city side or the town side and said, listen, I know you're having a problem. We're going to give it back to you. One person appealed it. It went to court, and the court said, even though it was an arrangement, an agreement, it was a shortfall on the city side, because of the statute of maintenance of effort, they had to give the money back to the school.
So who would have to look into this to see what we can do, what we're allowed to do legally? Is that
That would be
solicitor?
legal.
Thank you.
Council Vice President Vargas.
It was actually a follow-up, I think, to, I think with what the council president had asked earlier. But I'll do a follow-up real quickly. Am I able to ask the school committee chair a question through the chair on the budget?
Can it be directed to the superintendent or CFO?
I guess, or I can ask the school committee on a different side, but I guess, so I'll just say what I was gonna ask in general was, as a school committee chairman, as a former mayor, and knowing the budget and the fact that you worked on a budget, he's worked on the budget for the last, has had experience working with the budget for maybe 14 years or so. Where in this budget, while I know it's all of our homework and due diligence, where in this budget that the mayor has currently presented, would you take $2.4 million to actually be able to provide that to the school department, to the school? So given your experience as, well, as former mayor and having had the experience of 14 years worth of budgeting within the city and a school committee chairman, where in the city budget as proposed by Mayor Hopkins would you actually take $2.4 million to provide it to the school department?
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Correct.
One moment, we need to,
You can't just take $2.4 million out of one particular account.
Right. So we would have to we would have to defund, obviously, a lot of different departments throughout the entire city. It's just. But, yeah. Okay, and I know that that's what we have to do, but it's just for the folks that are also listening and watching, trying to get a sense as we're trying to find out within the next day, well, on Thursday on amendments, where do we actually find the 2.4 in this budget? And so I'm sure that a lot of us will be thinking about that and tomorrow and on Thursday to find out, where, because I'm trying to really look, I'm looking at the budget book and I'm going through it even within our system. And I'm saying to myself, I want to give the school department the $2.4 million and I'm going to try to figure out where in a budget we can find it. But if we don't have the 2.4 million, I can't promise you I'm going to give you the 2.4, but I'm going to promise you that I'm going to see where we can actually deduct it from. Because as we're removing from, if I remove or provide an amendment of Public Works, if I make an amendment to remove dollar amounts from other departments, whether it's, the planning, and I'm not saying those departments because that's where my intention is. I'm just trying to figure out we have to cut everywhere in a budget that has been presented to us of 3.5, with a $5 million reduction from last year, while giving the taxpayers a 1.97% tax increase. And we still have laid off, and the mayor laid off staff, right? So I still want to provide not only a quality of service to our residents in the city of Cranston, but I also want to make sure that we continue to provide the best education we can and provide the tools that are necessary for our educators in the school department to make sure that we continue to have a 21st century learning here in the city of Cranston, because our students deserve it. And it is an economic growth, right? When people are buying houses in Cranston, what drives them? It drove me to come from another city to come here because of the school, the schools, the quality of schools. So I was just really trying to pick your brain and advice on where the 2.4 would come from in here.
I have not analyzed the city budget. I mean, that was not my job. That's Mr. Moretti's job and of course the finance director's job.
Correct.
But in the past, as a councilman, I sat where you sat several years ago. Basically, we went through every single account. If we wanted to give the school department additional monies, and we took certain monies from each account. That's how we did it.
Other than possible conversation
we
with the
just
mayor
didn't
and possible
take,
tax increase,
lump
right?
sum out of one particular account. We didn't want to hurt that particular department to a point where they couldn't survive.
No, I appreciate it. And again, I'm going to try my best to try to figure out what amendments we can possibly have.
Yeah.
And some of the ones that I've been looking at, it still doesn't even amount to 2 million. And I really genuinely, and that's why if any one of you that are sitting here, I'm doing my homework, but if any one of you that are here or that are watching and have any other potential suggestions or ideas, I'm really open to that on how we can, at least on my own, can provide 2.4 that the school department is requesting.
I mean, the easiest solution would have been not to have a 1.9% increase in your taxes.
And he would have,
Would be raise the tax rate. That's the easiest way, of course. But you got to explain, the taxpayers are not going to be too happy about it. I mean, you can't please everybody. That's the
Right.
problem.
again, I am soft for the school department and that's why I'm trying to fit, and you guys know it. I was in the finance committee last year and I don't want to derail from the conversation we had last time, but I am totally in support of trying to figure out what we can do for the school department. But I'm trying to really pinch pennies here and figure out where we would be able to take that. All right, thank you. I appreciate it, Mayor. To the superintendent, just a quick question for you. With the recent signed legislation in terms of the teachers retirees coming in for the additional time to substitute, there's no budget impact on that, correct?
No, that's one of the best things that have come out of the State House recently. It allows us to employ retirees for longer periods of time. Like Mr. Crudale said, we really lack subs, so that has helped us. We have budgeted for subs, so that just allows us to continue employing them.
So there's no budget impact for the time being, correct? If we were to bring the retirees into to be subbing
I
at
wish
all?
I had that many that it would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the next one.
Yeah,
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
no problem.
I'll mention this. Councilwoman Vargas's, Council Vice President Vargas's point about the difficulty of our situation to try and find $2.4 million is, I think it is truthful. It is I don't want to say impossible, but it's pretty close to it, to find moving money within the, and I say that as someone who, as you know, have tried to move $50 to $50,000 to, in years past, get $15,000 to the school department. So every year, I and we try and do everything that we can, whether it's in the budget time or it's supporting resolutions to oppose the expansion of charter schools that are taking resources away from our public school systems. We do try and support the schools and the teachers' contracts every time. Trying to find 2.4 is a mountain that I'm not sure we're going to be able to climb, moving money line by line outside of increasing the tax rate, which is something that we're going to have to discuss as a council in the next 48 hours. We're going to have honest conversations about that come amendment night. But at that, seeing no other comment from members on the committee, thank you all for your time being here this evening. Members of the public, members of the school committee, members of the administration and our Cranston Public School system. Thank you all for being here. At this time, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned.